Hello, everybody.
Happy
Good morning,
Wednesday.
everyone.
Welcome to video lecture number 6. Today we're going to be talking about keystone species, a very interesting, fascinating ecology topic. Okay, but first, we're going to show you our scientists of the week. All right.
Okay, I want to congratulate David for being Scientist of the Week. David has maintained a positive attitude and work ethic during this time of uncertainty, and he's joined our optional Zoom calls and shared his good news and lifted the spirits of his teachers and peers. In class, I wanted to remind everyone that David always turned in his assignments on time and was kind to his peers. Now that we've transitioned to distant learning, David has stayed true to himself and maintained his positive character. So I want to congratulate you and thank you for representing the Period 5 family.
Okay, so our scientist of the week for this week goes to Mario. So congrats to Mario for being scientist of the week. Mario is scientist of the week because he has shown great work ethic outside of the classroom during distance learning. He noticed that he had assignments missing. He took the time during this week to catch up. Thank you for taking the assignment for Wednesday seriously and completing missing work. Keep up the good work. Congrats and thank you for representing the Period 1 family.
All right, good job, Mario and David from last week. We've just got some announcements. Our school year is almost over, about 3 weeks left to go. So all late work, any late work that you have that you want to submit is going to be due to us by Friday, June 5th, because all your teachers are submitting their grades around that time, like during that weekend. Okay, so remember, this grade that you're going to receive for all your classes is the final 20-week report card grade. This is the permanent grade that stays on your school record forever, so make sure you do what you need to do. If your grade is low and you need some advice about Ms. Kwan, Ms. Brown, Ms. Tafoya, what can I do to raise my grade the fastest? Which assignments are going to raise my grade the most? Then just send us a Schoology message or text us on Remind or message us, email us, and ask us what it is that you can do. We'll look at your grades for you and tell you which assignments are going to impact your grade the most and give you the best grade boost. All right? Also, another super important announcement is that you need to drop off all your textbooks for all your classes this week. Okay, so you could have gone either today or you can go tomorrow, and it's from 9 to 11 a.m. or from 1 to 3 p.m. Okay, so you're gonna have to take all your textbooks for all your classes. You're not gonna get out of your car. You just drive through the back of the school. They're gonna collect the books from you so that you don't have to, you know what happens if you don't pay for your books. When you don't turn in your books, you have to pay for them, right? They're very expensive, so you gotta drop off all your textbooks. If you borrowed any library books, you can drop those off too. And they're gonna give you like a plastic bag with everything that was in your PE locker as well. Okay, so that's May 27th and May 28th. So if you didn't go today, then you can go tomorrow. Also, the school wanted us to encourage you to buy a yearbook, and you can buy a yearbook for this year at flemingms.org. If you have any questions about any of those announcements, then send us a message, let us know. All right, like I said, we're going to be talking about keystone species today. This is one of the coolest topics in ecology. We're in our ecology unit, right? Where we learn about how living things interact in the places that they live with the things around them. So keystone species is going to be our topic for today. We're going to be talking about bears, lions, sea otters. All right, so in your notebook, I do want you to write down keystone species and go ahead and write down this definition. A species that has a disproportionately large effect on its environment. Okay, so in an environment, let's say the ocean ecosystem, there are all kinds of species, right? If we think about our tide pool ecosystem, we got sea stars, we got clams, mussels, barnacles, sea hares, all those awesome things that we learn about at the beginning of the school year. There's lots of species, and they're all important, every single one, but some species inside of an ecosystem are more important than others because they have more of an effect. So keystone species, they're those kinds of species. They play a critical role in maintaining the structure and stability of an ecological community. Okay, so we're going to go through 3 different examples of different keystone species in 3 different environments, and you'll see that when this keystone species is removed from the environment, the whole ecological community becomes unbalanced, and sometimes the whole ecosystem can be wiped out just by removing a single species. That's how important these keystone species are. All right, the term keystone comes from this, this architectural structure, okay? Back then, when people build an arch that looks like this, the last stone that they put in is this top stone right here called a keystone, and that keeps all the other ones in place. If you were to remove that keystone, then all the other stones would fall and the structure would fall apart, okay, as you see in this GIF. So watch it one more time. All right, so that keystone species, or the keystone at the top, is so important because it keeps everything stable. All right, so I'm going to be talking about a very important keystone species on our west coast of the United States, and that is the sea otter, okay? The sea otter is this cute mammal. They're closely related to skunks, actually, and they're a marine mammal, so they, you know, mammal means that they give milk to their young and have live birth and have fur. And these sea otters are so cute. They cuddle up with their babies like this, as you can see. They float on their backs. And actually, their fur is so thick and so soft because it keeps them warm, right? They live in the ocean, they're mammals, they're warm-blooded, and they need this thick fur to keep them warm in their environment. And since their fur is so thick and soft, it was hunted. So around the 1740s, all these people went out and hunted sea otters so that they can turn their sea otter coats or their pelts into a sea otter coat, like the one that you see right here. And it was in high demand. Everyone wanted it because it was so nice feeling and so soft. And so for about 200 years, these sea otters were hunted all up and down the coast of California and all the way up to Alaska, all the way up the coast, the western coast of Canada as well. And since they were being hunted so much, their numbers got reduced, and they almost went extinct. And we actually used to have a bunch of sea otters that lived off of our coast, like right off of our beaches, but now we don't have them in our area anymore. But it definitely, if you go a little north, like up to Monterey Bay, then you can see them there. So what happened was, after the sea otters were being hunted so much, we realized that, oh my gosh, we're killing too many of them too quickly. They're going to go extinct. So we put in some laws saying that we can't hunt them anymore, which is good. But then ecologists, people who study ecology, we noticed that the disappearance of the otters from all these different ecosystems all up and down the coast, the disappearance was impacting the kelp forests. Okay, so kelp forests started to disappear, and we're wondering how that happened. So when we look at this food web of a kelp forest ecosystem, we can see that there's kelp down here and other type of algae, and there's all kinds of different species, all kinds of animals and plants that are living in this kelp forest. We do see the sea otter here at the top, okay? And remember, the arrows point in the direction of energy flow. So sea otters get energy from sea urchins, sea stars, abalones, crabs, fish, and they give energy to sharks, right? They get eaten by sharks. So they eat a lot of things inside of this kelp forest ecosystem. But one of the most important things that they eat are these sea urchins, okay? And this is important because if we go back to this food web, sea urchins are eaten only by sea otters. So it doesn't really have any other predators. Sea otters are the only thing that knows how to break open this spiny sea urchin without getting poked and eat the insides for food. And then you can also notice that what sea urchins eat are the kelp right here, right? So ecologists realize that when the sea otters were wiped out by hunting, what happened was there weren't enough predators that ate the sea urchins. And since there were no predators that ate the sea urchins, they overpopulated this kelp forest area and they completely ate up all the kelp and wiped it out. Okay, and if we go back to this food web, you can see that there are all these organisms that depend on the kelp to live in, to hide in, to eat, or they eat the things that eat the kelp. So if the kelp is gone, then pretty much the whole kelp forest ecosystem is gone. So we realize that, oh my goodness, the sea otter is so important to this kelp forest ecosystem. So that was a crazy discovery, right? It came out in the news, and we found out that the sea otter is one of those keystone species that's so important for this ecosystem. So I do want you to write this in your notes. The sea otter is an important keystone species. When we remove them from the kelp forest ecosystem due to hunting, it has cascading impacts. So without the predators, the only predator that the sea urchin has, without those sea otters, they're going to overpopulate. Then that leads to the urchins eating up all the kelp. Since there's so many urchins, they're going to eat up all the kelp and destroy the kelp forest. And that in turn leads to the kelp forest itself disappearing, and all those animals that depend on the kelp forest, they disappear as well. Okay, so if you need to pause the video, go ahead, take a moment, and draw this cause and effect diagram into your notes, please.
Okay, so now we're going to be talking about grizzly bears, which is another keystone species. Okay, so a little bit of facts about the grizzly bear is that compared to a 6-foot tall person, this is how big it would be on all fours. And that would be interesting. I thought that would be interesting for you to know, because when I think of animals, I like to think about their size relative to us. Like, how big is this thing? Could it attack me? Could it eat me? I don't know. And so its length is 5 to 8 feet. Its height is 3.5 feet as shoulders. It can weigh 300 to 800 pounds. So these are pretty big daddies if you think about it. They're pretty big. Their lifespan is 25 years, and their distribution, that's a fancy word which ecologists use to say, like, where do they live? About 1,500 bears roam in recovery zones in Montana, Washington, Idaho, and Wyoming. And later I'm going to show a map showing where they used to be and where they live now and why. And then here is a picture of a woman. Maybe she's an ecologist, I don't know. And she's taking a picture with a grizzly bear's like paw. And you can see just how big it is compared to her head. And then here is a man standing next to a grizzly bear. So when it stands up on 2 feet like us humans, it's really tall and way bigger than your average man. Okay, so this is a map showing the current range of where grizzly bears live and the historical range, so where they used to live. So they used to be found all the way from Alaska and to Mexico, but because as we started to expand and we started to set up civilization, we kind of like took over the grizzly bear's natural habitat, and they're in a smaller range because of human interactions. So humans have in the past, and some people still do this for sport, they hunt grizzly bears and kill them. And if you ever seen like those cabins in the woods, they have like grizzly bear like grizzly bear like heads or like paws or something on the walls. Like people think that's cool to show off. And also grizzly bears, since we do live in their habitat now, they come into what we call now urban areas where we live. And usually if people see a grizzly bear, because as you've seen in the size, they're really big, they panic, and usually sadly the bear has to be killed sometimes. And here's a picture of a grizzly bear in an urban area with the trash can. And so grizzly bears are found in Alaska, and there's currently about 32,000 bears there. And in Alaska, they're not protected under the Endangered Species Act. And in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, there's 695 bears, and they actually have a recovery center for them there. And some of the bears are actually protected under the Endangered Species Act. And then here's some other pictures of bears with interacting in urban areas. So you can see there's a bear in a swimming pool and a bear on the Ring camera. Some people have those for security, and it was recording, and you can see that the bear was at the door. Maybe he was knocking and he wanted something to eat. I don't know. And then here's another map that shows the grizzly bears in the west. So they're mostly found in the North Cascades, the Selkirks, Cabinet Yaak, Northern Continental Divide, Selway Bitterroot, and Greater Yellowstone. And so basically they're found not really in California, and kind of Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana and Washington. And it's just basically shows like which ones are considered recovery areas and potential habitats also that the grizzly bears can be introduced to and they can thrive, because that's where other animals that they interact with could go well with in their food web, and also like where they could live because like the ecosystem is fit for them and the food that they eat is there. Some interesting facts is that grizzly bears, even though they're pretty big, they're actually really fast, and they can run 30 to 37 miles per hour. So this is really helpful for them when they're hunting like moose or elk, or when they're hunting for their salmon and stuff. As you can see in this GIF, the bear is running pretty fast. And grizzly bears, they do hibernate from October to May due to seasonal food shortages, low temperatures, and snow cover on the ground, especially for those grizzly bears that live like up in Washington and in the Arctics. And they do experience body changes during hibernation. So the way they breathe, so they decrease their breath from 6 to 10 breaths per minute to one breath every 45 seconds. Their metabolic rate changes, so that means like how fast you can digest food and get energy. And their body temperature does drop from 38 degrees to 31 degrees Celsius. They do not eat, drink, defecate, or urinate during hibernation. In order to survive during this long slumber, they live off the fat stored in their body. So like before they go into hibernation, what they do is they eat a whole bunch of food and they get bigger so that they can live off of this when they're sleeping. And bears continue to produce feces during hibernation. However, the feces will form a plug in their anus. And then I included these gifts because I think it's funny. Like if you ever watch SpongeBob, then you know like Sandy, she is a squirrel and she does hibernate also, just like bears does. And then this one, Bay caught me hibernating. So what do grizzlies eat? So grizzly bears eat fish, insects, sheep, elk, berries, nuts, and seeds. So they're omnivores. And then also there's a food web showing one of the food webs a grizzly bear can be in, because depending on where they live, they eat different things. So if they live in the mountains, they're going to eat different things than a grizzly bear that lives in the forest. So grizzly bears is showing that it eats berries, deer, and also is showing that the grizzly bears eat the trout. And then here's another food web showing a grizzly bear who lives in like the forest area. So grizzly bears, yes, as I said already, they eat berries. They also do eat seeds. They eat the deers. And as you can see, the grizzly bear is at top. Grizzly bears are considered tertiary consumers. And how are grizzly bears keystone species? So grizzly bears are called the diligent gourmets because they enrich the soil with nutrients from eating fish like salmon or trout, and they drag them throughout the forest. So they don't just eat the salmon or trout just like by the river, they bring it to other parts. And then these leftover carcasses, which is like the skeleton or whatever like the grizzly bear didn't eat, it gets decomposed and it fertilizes the soil with nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, and this allows plants and other trees to grow. And they aerate the soil and mix organic matter for the growth of wildflowers by digging for roots and bulbs in mountainous terrains. And in this GIF, it's showing the little bear and it's digging in the garden. And this is what I mean by aerating the soil and mixing it up. So grizzly bears can kind of be seen as gardeners. So they kind of have a green thumb. And if you ever read Paddington or watched the movie as a kid, I thought this was cute too, the Paddington in the garden. And grizzly bears also regulate prey species like elk and moose, which are secondary consumers. They hunt the weak or scavenge on the carcasses of elk and moose, and this helps to clean up the forest. And then so they're kind of acting like decomposers. So now in your notebook, I want you to write this down. So I'm kind of condensing the two slides that I already went over. So the grizzly bear is an important keystone species. And this is because if grizzly bears are removed from the forest or mountain ecosystem due to hunting by humans, then without predators, the elk and moose will overpopulate. Because remember, the grizzly bears are the tertiary consumers and the elk and moose are the secondary consumers. So if no one is above them or no one's eating them, then their population can just increase. And also remember how I said grizzly bears are kind of like gardeners and they have their green thumbs. So if grizzly bears don't help pollinate by spreading seeds, if they don't help by enriching the soil by eating dead carcasses or mixing the food of the soil when digging for food, then soil isn't as nutrient rich. So the producers like grass, trees, and plants for other animals to eat, they're not gonna be as regular, and there's not gonna be as a great number in their population because all of the other animals that live in the same ecosystem as the grizzly bears depend on the grass, trees, and plants also to eat.
Alrighty, so now to talk about the keystone species of the Sahara Desert, which is the famous lion. And the reason why you see Lion King here is because Lion King does a really good job about showing you how an ecosystem works. And it's a beautiful movie with a really nice story. So I don't know if you remember, but there's a scene where Mufasa is looking out into the desert, into the grasslands, and telling Simba that we're all connected in the great circle of life. And right now we're learning about the webs, so we're learning about how we're all connected in this circle of life. We use the sunlight to for the plants to do photosynthesis, and then we have animals like the impalas and the zebras that eat that grass. And then we have the famous lion who's gonna eat that. And then when we die, our our carcasses, like Ms. Brown said, is going to become nutrients for the soil. So that's what I wanted to show you guys in this first slide, that they have a really great quote showing you how we're all connected. So lions and lionesses, their scientific name is Panthera leo. Okay, so now you know a scientific name of an animal. And as Ms. Brown said, we want to know how big these animals are compared to us. So lions, they're pretty short, but what makes them really fierce and tough is that they have a lot of muscle, and that makes them weigh a lot. So even though a male lion can be up to 1.2 meters tall, I'm taller than the lion, but he weighs more than me, and his paws are bigger than my hands, and he just has more force than I do. And what's crazy about lions is they can jump up to like 36 feet tall. So don't think you can hide in a tree or something, because they can reach you. And lions and lionesses are pretty fast, but they can only do it like sprints. They can't run, let's say, like a marathon at the same rate. So that's why they're so sneaky, you know, because they're slow up until the moment that they need to catch their prey. So most of the times they're gonna try and catch zebras, the impalas, the gazelles, all these really fast animals, because they're really light in weight, but they're not gonna succeed always, because like I said, they can only be fast for a short period of time. And then if you remember in The Lion King, there was this big battle for the kingdom, right, between Mufasa and his brother Scar. And that's because in real life, there can only be one male per pride. So these two males, they have to compete to show who is more dominant. And they do this by, you know, fighting each other to the death. I didn't want to show that to you because that could be really gruesome. But you see how Scar really knocks his brother out over the cliff, and he keeps the pride. And he wasn't the dominant one, but he cheated, you know? So, yeah. And so these prides, I don't know if you remember, but there was a lot of lionesses. So a pride can be as big as 30 lions, depending on the limiting factors. Remember that limiting factors are the amount of space, the amount of food, the amount of water that there can be. Okay, diseases can also be a limiting factor. So it really depends, but that's a big population of lions. Okay, and I keep saying that the word lionesses. Okay, so female lions are known as lionesses, and they're the ones that hunt for the pride. So the pride is the wolf pack. If we were talking about wolves, they are considered a wolf pack, but a pride is, you know, a group of lions. And what's really cool about the word lionesses is that if you think about a princess, that's the word for a female, but then when you talk about a male, you say prince, right? So it's kind of a similar term. And then as of right now, lions are considered a vulnerable species. They're not endangered yet. And the reason why they're considered vulnerable species is because sometimes the lions are hunted, you know, as trophies. People think that they're cool for having killed a lion. Some lions are killed because they're attacking the livestock of these people in Africa. And other times they're just dying because of the lack of food and the available because of urbanization and all of these human impacts that we've discussed in other ways. So let me show you the food web of what lions really eat. Sorry, my computer is a little slow, but let's remember that the sun is the main source of energy, okay? And remember that the arrows are pointing to how the energy is traveling. So we got the sun, you know, the grass is the primary producer. We've seen a lot of grassland animals like the zebra, the impala, the elephant, okay? These three animals are considered the primary consumers because they're eating the primary producer. Okay? And then we have other animals that can possibly eat um, these animals, like the hyena, the cheetah, and the lion. Okay? And the reason why the lion is the keystone species in this food web is because they are the ones who control the amount of primary consumers. Okay, so the lion, obviously, the mightiest, the top predator, and they make sure that the zebra, the impala, and the elephant maintain a small population. Okay, they are in charge of maintaining a good balance, which leads me to the next one. Next slide is how lions maintain a balanced ecosystem. Okay, so remember in The Lion King when the grassland was so beautiful and then Scar came into power and then the grasslands looked dry and dead? That's because Scar let the hyenas take over the hunting. Okay, he thought that it would be fine if he didn't do any of the work, which he never has to do, but he let the hyenas eat all of the grassland consumers. Okay, so he let them eat the zebras, the impalas, and the elephants, and that led them to not have any grass. So if all of those zebras were eaten, then there was no one to eat the grass, and it just became a vicious cycle and not balanced. Okay, so that's why lions are the keystone species. They are the top predators in the savanna ecosystem. They help reduce the population of the grazing animals, and we've been talking about them. We also have gazelles, zebras, or the wild beast, but the impalas and the elephants are also a part of this food web. Okay, and if their population grows too big, then they eat all of the grasses, and that leads to like a population crash. And then so the lions feed on the primary consumers and they're controlling the population, and they allow for homeostasis in the ecosystem. Homeostasis is another word to say balanced, okay? And you've probably heard this another time in our different units. But yeah, so notice the big difference of when Mufasa was in charge and then Scar was in charge. So Mufasa, he let naturally the lionesses, bring in some of the food, not overtaking the amount of food, not eating out of gluttony, okay? And Scar didn't. Scar messed with the entire cycle of life, and that's why we see this really sad Pride Rock. Yeah, gotta watch the movie again. Okay, so the keystone species, just to remind you, is a species that has a disproportionately large effect on its environment, and it plays a critical role in maintaining the structure and stability of an ecological community. And just like the lion, the sea otter, and the bear, there's a bunch of other keystone species in different ecosystems that we didn't talk about today. Okay, so these are not the only three, but these are the ones that we wanted to talk about because we thought were the coolest and you might be most interested in. But there's also the wolves that people think of being as bad, but they actually do a really good service to the Yellowstone National Park. Okay, there's different sharks that are also important and play a role in different ecosystems. So there's not just one keystone species, but the main takeaway from this lesson is that keystone species are in charge of maintaining a good balance in that environment. And if they go missing, then you see the effects that it has on the environment. And the main thing that it disturbs is the biodiversity that could be present in that ecosystem. So I don't know about you, but I like to see a lot of different animals, not just one animal. And that's why keystone species are important. So thank you for listening to our TED Talk today. Just kidding. I hope that you had a good Monday celebrating your Memorial Weekend, and don't forget about those important announcements about grades and assignments. And we're almost done, so don't lose your energy yet. Okay? Anything else you guys want to say?
No.
No, you said it all. Make sure you turn in all your late work, missing work by June 5th, then turn in your textbooks to the school today and tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in.